Make sure you pre-mark the scales on the front page of the packet before doing the assignments. The scale that will go with this assignment is the first scale, the one on the top. The learning goal that you're trying to strive for is to be able to understand that the federal government and state government both have different powers and they work together in a system called federalism. So if you understand what federalism is and how the state government and the federal government have different jobs and how they, the different powers that they have, that would mean you met the learning goal of the 3. So make sure after you finish this assignment, you go back and reassess yourself on the scale. Today, we're going to be reading State Power, Got a Reservation. Be sure to have a pen, pencil, or highlighter ready so you can mark the text as we go through it. So take a look at the top paragraph. States have power. If you've ever been to a wedding, you probably heard the officiant wrap things up by saying, "By the power vested in me by the state of blank," whichever state they're in, "I now pronounce the person performing the wedding got the power to perform weddings from the state. But where did the state get the power to give that power?" Little countries. If you look up state in the dictionary, one of the definitions will sound a lot like the definition for a country. That's because state is another word for a country or nation. A state is a political unit that has authority to govern itself. The United States is a group of states that decided to unite themselves under a single government. When states do that, they are not considered countries. And yet, they have their own governments, and they have their own power. The Constitution treats states partly as if they were independent countries and partly as small units within one big country. It lets states have the power to do a lot of things, but gives some powers only to the federal government. So, a state has its own power within it, but it also has to follow what the U.S. government is saying. So I want you to use your highlighter, pen or pencil, and either underline or circle or highlight what the definition for a state is. Hey, that's reserved. The Constitution gives a specific list of powers to the federal government. But even if you read the entire Constitution, you won't find a list of powers for states. Instead, the Constitution says this: "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." Which that means, if in the Constitution, the document in charge of our whole government, if it doesn't say the U.S. government, the big government, has the power to do something, if it doesn't say you have the power to do this, or it doesn't say the states can't do it, that means the state's in charge of it. So that's everything else not listed. Delegated means assigned or given. Reserved means set aside for. So under the Constitution, if a power isn't specifically given to the federal government, it's a power set aside for the states. Unless the Constitution says it's something the states aren't allowed to do. There are no reserved powers for the federal government. It only has the powers the Constitution says it has. So the only thing the big government, the federal government, can do is what the Constitution says it can do. Anything that's not talked about in the Constitution, that's reserved for the states. So I want you to underline or highlight what reserved means, and also underline or highlight what delegated means. Aw, that's no fun. So what can't states do? You might want a cool title like Sir Brandon or Princess Caitlin, but you won't be getting one from your state government. It's not allowed. Granting titles of nobility is one of the many things the Constitution says states can't do. It's also something the federal government can't do. Other no-nos include things that would interfere with federal government's ability to exercise its own power. These are things like making treaties with other countries or starting a war. The Constitution also says no to states causing problems for other states. For example, a state can't charge taxes on goods brought in from one state to another. So things like going to war. The state of Florida can't decide that we're going to go to war against another country. The whole U.S. government has to decide that. And things like the state of Florida can't decide I'm going to make Georgia pay more money for my stuff than I'm going to, charge Alabama. Those kind of things are all things that the Constitution says, no, you can't do. But other things, like education, stuff that's not mentioned, that's all left to the states. All right, turn the page. Go for it. So what powers have the green light for states? That's like saying you can't have pizza, tacos, or mac and cheese for dinner. Now go list everything you can have. There are lots of powers the Constitution doesn't say anything about at all. There's nothing about education, healthcare, fire protection, police, marriage, driver's license, how many dogs you can have, what happens to your stuff when you die, or whether skateboards are allowed at the park. State and local governments have the power to make rules about all that and much, much more. They exercise this power by adopting constitutions of their own and by passing their own laws. So, I want you to underline how does state and local government regulate all these things we're talking about? What do they do to control the people in their area? Share and share alike. What if the Constitution says the federal government can do something, but doesn't say states can't do it? For example, the Constitution gives the federal government the right to collect taxes, but it doesn't say the states can't collect taxes. Does that mean that they can both collect taxes? In this case, yes. One collecting taxes doesn't stop the other from collecting taxes. Shared powers are called concurrent powers. Concurrent means at the same time. States can't share a power the Constitution gives only to the federal government, and if sharing a power would cause a conflict, then the power can't be shared. Other concurrent powers include running a court system, enforcing laws, and borrowing money. So concurrent powers are the powers that the big U.S. government and the state government both have the power to do. So make sure you underline or highlight what concurrent powers, the definition, what it means. What does concurrent mean? Speaking of local governments, the Constitution says nothing about counties, cities, towns, boroughs, or any other small unit of government. It's up to states to decide what kinds of smaller governments to create and what powers those governments will have. States rely on local government to deliver certain kinds of services to the people. That's because the smaller the unit of government, the closer that government is to the people. States also give local governments the power to make their own decisions about things like whether your dog needs to be on a leash or whether Ugly Mart can build a 100-foot purple store downtown. Local governments are also usually empowered to collect property and sales taxes. So the smallest unit of government is the local government, and that they get their power from the state. So I want you to underline that paragraph where it says the local government gets their power from the states, because that's important to know. The state of Florida is giving Dade City the power to manage and control this area. And the reason why they do that is because the government of Dade City knows what the people in Dade City want. If the state of Florida it was just the state in charge of everyone, then they may not know, they're all the way over in Tallahassee. They may not be in touch with what Dade City needs. So they delegate or they, assign the power to smaller units of government who can work directly with the people in their area. And the final paragraph, state and federal funding. Sometimes the federal government will like to pass a nationwide law, but because of the state and federal power split, it can't. But in some cases, it can influence states to change their own laws. This is because over time, cash-strapped states have become more and more dependent on federal money in order to provide services to state citizens. One example is Federal Highways Fund. Years ago, research showed many fatal accidents were caused by young people who had been drinking. The federal government didn't have the power to raise the drinking age, so in 1984 it told states they would not receive highway funds unless they raised the state drinking age to 21, and all the states complied. So there sometimes becomes a problem because if it didn't say the federal government's in charge of it, then they can't do anything about it. So in this case, it's deciding how old the drinking age should be in different parts of the United States. Well, it used to be one state would say 18, another state would say 20, another state would say 21. And since the big government, the president, the federal government, they wanted every state to say 21, but they couldn't make them, they said, fine, we won't give you any money for your highways unless you change your drinking age to 21. And then that way they were able to get them to, by providing an incentive. but they couldn't make them do it. Now the assignment you'll be doing, I'm going to read the instructions and explain them to you. It says, activity, strike it. Things are getting out of control in the state of Pennsylvania. The state legislature has seriously overreached its power with a new set of laws. So step 1, read Pennsylvania's new laws and compare them to the federal power cheat sheet. So the page before that is the federal power cheat sheet. That's the cheat sheet for what the government's allowed to do. So read over these new laws and then also read over that cheat sheet. Step 2, then strike or cross out any law that the state of Pennsylvania does not have the power to pass. But also be careful, some powers are concurrent, so both states and federal government have them. So remember, some powers, both of them can do at the same time. So you need to read over these laws, check them against the fact sheet on the page before, the cheat sheet, and make sure they're allowed to do it. If not, you need to cross them out.